welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm Christie. I'm with the mentor team, and I am here to talk about planning ahead today. So I appreciate the questions that led to this live. Hi, if you're joining us, say hello, tell me, introduce yourself, and let me know if you are in the thick of planning or where you are on this, on the spectrum of whether you're in the middle of planning or starting to plan, or how things are going in your planning for your school year. So we had some great questions, and I really appreciate Emily for asking them. If you have questions, you can ask here during the live or either afterward. This will be there will be a replay posted, and you can certainly ask questions in that post. So again, I'm Christy. I'm glad you're here, and I'll just jump right in. I'm going to start we're going to talk about details on choosing packages, about planning ahead, and making a rough scope and sequence for each child. So a projected path, maybe in pencil, I recommend for each of your children. And that's certainly not something you have to do right away. But if you are if it helps you to move to the next step, to have the kind of see where you're going, that always was helpful to me, and I liked to do that. It's been fun over the years to when we've moved, and then I find later in pencil all of these plans that I've done and kind of see what actually happened compared to what I had projected, and it doesn't always match. Sometimes it does, but anyway, I wanted to show you that I have a new catalog. I don't know if yours has made it to your house just yet. This is kind of strange the way I have to hold this to be seen. But catalogs, the new catalogs for 2023 are out, so you can get those if you haven't yet. And on the very last page of the catalog here, if you look at the that looks upside down, that is. The very last page, there is, I'm going upside down now. This is the scope and sequence. And scope and sequence is just being the, what all is covered and when, the order of how it's covered. And this kind of gives you an overview for all of the levels of Sonlight, everything that Sonlight offers, and you can then, choose the best path for your family. And as we've said before, there are more levels than you can do in Sonlight, so you pick and choose the thing that works best for you. So don't feel pressure to try to do all of the things, because that was really impossible whenever we set out and we were like, oh no, we could do this. But now it's even more impossible because they've added levels. And so there's something I wanted to point out on this scope and sequence page. You will see a QR code here, and this is really cool. It allows you to get a detailed scope and sequence for individual levels here. So every level of Sonlight, that's one thing I've always loved. There is a great organized plan for every level that you do. So if you're doing history, you will see a scope and sequence for that history for the year. So you can kind of see at a glance in a very organized way what is going to be covered and what you're going to be studying about for the year. So that kind of helps you get prepared. Maybe even you can add in some movies or add in, just prepare your students for what's coming up. Ooh, we're going to study about this later this year. And that just kind of helps them get ready to learn and just aids that process. So, also, it kind of gives you the order of things so that you can do even more, detailed planning. So, hi and welcome as you're joining. I'm glad you're here. And we're talking about planning. And so I'm going to start with Emily's questions. I'm going to start with the more specific and work to the general. So I'm going to just dive in with some very specific questions. If you have questions as we go along, you can ask here, or again, when this replay is posted, it might be easier to ask there. Either way, whichever works best for you. So if a younger sibling listens in to older siblings read alouds, will they want to listen to them again a couple of years later? And of course, that answer is going to vary depending on the age of the child, how much they're paying attention at that time, their interest level, whether they're going to remember that. You're going to have your own science lab on the human memory when you're doing this, and how amazing it is. My youngest son was a baby when we started, and his older brothers were homeschooling. He was a newborn, and so he got Sonlight read-alouds all the way through. And I think one of the first that I remember him really participating in, this is not a Sonlight title now, I don't think, and so, or maybe it is, I'm not sure. But he did reread this, and he did not remember it, but he very much engaged with this book, Ginger Pie. This was one he loved back in the day. He wanted to read it when he was, I think it was about 3, and he was like, oh, I want to know what happens. Don't read this without me. And so it was really sweet. He joined in, he answered questions, and he did not remember anything about it when he, down the road. So that is one that he did completely reread. This book, The Penderwicks, was one that everybody remembered when we had read this. And so I would try a sequel sometimes if you're reading a book and and it's something that they remember when your second child gets to that level and they're like, oh, I remember this book. Then you have sequels or prequels, or if there's a series, I would go with that or a similar book, or don't feel pressure to add another book. Sometimes I used that to just coast on down down through the schedule, go to the next read aloud, and you just built in a little cushion time that can only help you when you get to the end. If you get to the end and you have extra bandwidth and nobody had there were no emergencies, nobody broke their leg and you needed a little cushion in your schedule, if you get to the end and you want to add on books, that's where I would add them on. I wouldn't feel pressure in the middle of the semester to try to come up with a book that I hear people asking sometimes, I need a book about this because we've already read this one. And, you may want to do that, but don't feel pressure, I think, to do that, because you may need that extra cushion, for whatever you might need it for. And you might just finish a couple weeks early in that one, in read-alouds if they remember when they get to, a book that you've already read. So yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And there's a variety of things that we do. If you have a good idea about this, and this, for Emily or for anyone else asking about this, if a younger sibling listens in to older siblings read alouds, will they want to listen to them again a couple of years later? You can do that now or in the replay. Let us know, or let them know what, how that works at your house. Every answer is going to be different there. And then let's see, do people ever combine the read alouds or alternate when doing more than one history, Bible, literature? And I'm going to show you, I brought a little stack. I just went through my shelf and I found for different levels books that we tended to, we all read together as a family. This is one that my younger one did not remember, but this is a book that we loved, Understood Betsy and B. And I will say that we did reread this because they were so young that they didn't remember it. But it was a really important book. It had some really thought-provoking things in this book. I love this book. Sticks Across the Chimney was one we read together as a family, and everybody remembered all of it. So this gave me cushion in my, it may be different for you based on ages and things, but this is just an example of one that we read, Sticks Across the Chimney. Everyone loved it. My husband even came home during lunch break and he started listening in at the door. He was like eating his lunch in the door and said, oh, wait, don't stop. I want to hear what happens next. So this is one we all read together and loved. Carry On, Mr. Bowditch is one of my favorites. I read this individually with each of them. The vocabulary is stepped up a little bit. The length, as you can see, this is in D. This steps up a lot from C. And so this was one that my new, the ones that were of the age of D, maybe if they had tagged along in D and we read this, this might be one they floated away on, or maybe heard some of and didn't quite absorb everything. We have a comment. I repeat read-alouds for the younger kids again. They will get more or different things out of it the second or third time through. Yes, absolutely. And we love to repeat favorites too. Absolutely. Across 5 Aprils, this is one that I have read. I got my old copy. I have one that has what Sonlight, a different cover. It's actually bigger. But anyway, this is one that I have reread with all of them, but a family favorite we might read together, but then I just feel like there's important things they're going to get out of it when they're older, and so we might reread it even if they remember it. The Shakespeare Stealer is one that we did not repeat when we got to it. It was a great book, but one thing that my youngest likes to do, if he fully remembers a book, he might read it as a reader and just have it as an extra reader in his, because he's already familiar with the book. So that still creates some time for me in the read aloud zone, you know. Unless it's just one you want to read, it's really up to you what you would like to do. A Murder for Her Majesty, this Shakespeare Stealer is in G, and then A Murder for Her Majesty is H. And so these were favorites that we I was always willing to read again if they wanted to, but if they remembered everything about it and they wanted, you know, to go on, it was okay with me. So it just depends on how you want to do it. Other people can chime in with what their preference is. But repeating books, there's so much value to that. You learn more each time you read a book. There are some of these books I've read 5 or 6 times. Some, you know, I tend to pre-read because I like to do that. And then reading with each of my guys. And then, you know, sometimes we combined and sometimes we didn't. So different. And sometimes I just have read them again because I love them so much. So there are certainly titles that are worth repeating. And so you'll find that with Sonlight titles. So that is an answer to that. What packages, let's see, I'm sorry. What do you do if you have one child in a 4-day and one in a 5-day option? And so I think as your children get older, as our boys got older, they're going to have, the older had more, you know, obviously more to do, even in the younger ages, that's the case. So I would say we tend to try, I've always done 5-day, but we just work it into 4 days. That's kind of how we have worked. So it just depends. It's going to depend, you know, scheduling on that. That's certainly something that you can, I've managed doing a 4-day and a 5-day at the same time, and it worked fine. You just play with the schedule and you know, schedule how you would like to, but I do think that is definitely manageable. Other people can definitely feel free to share their input in the comments here or in the replay. What do you do if you have one child in a 4-day and one in a 5-day option? Are there any best practice tips on that? I would say that you know, on days when all of, like, let's say it's on the for the student that's doing the 4-day, they may listen in for the read alouds on that 5-day, and they may not, just depending on what the book is and what their interest level is. And they join in whenever they would like to. So what packages only offer 5-day? Okay, so your combined packages, since you're already condensing it, I mean to say condensed, not combined, D plus E, G plus H, J is a 5-day, and then high school, they're all 5-day. And so I think in that regard, the condensed are going to be 5-day. Everything else has a 4-day or a 5-day option. So that's something to consider if you're definitely set on a 4-day and you're trying to decide whether you want to do a condensed year. You may not want to do that because it's a 5-day. So you have to just pick and choose. Or if you want to get a 5-day and then make it fit within your 4-day schedule and then trim down however you would like to, you know, that's an option. But it is definitely set up as 5-day because it's already condensed 2 years into one, so that you're doing 1 year of American history instead of 2 separate, or 1 year of world history instead of 2 separate. So, you know, that's totally up to you, but those are the ones that offer the 5-day only. So if you have multiple years, or I said years, but it really is ages. If you have multiple ages, when should you use the same package and when should you use separate packages? So that is just very, people are going to have different ways that they do this. And I will say that I started off, I think the first year that you start, the advisor that I talked to at Sonlight recommended that I start with one. And I think that was really great advice. And I advise people that way now as well. That one, getting your feet on the ground with homeschooling, with Sonlight, it's a really good idea to do one and get your feet wet that way and then build from there. And so I just basically, there were times, I know at one point I was doing piano lessons with my guys, and so I would go to the piano lesson to the, my friend's house that was teaching them piano, and we would be there for 2 hours, but I never had everyone there. And so I lost so much time thinking this is 2 full hours of our schedule on this day, and if we weren't all doing the same level, this would be a great time to do 30 minutes of read aloud with, the ones that are not doing piano at the time. And so there were several times that I had that kind of thing happen. And then the following year I decided, okay, I'm going to break them up. And then, or just it would, in general, it was hard to get all of them together at the same time because they had different things going on, especially as they get older and they have more things happening. Sometimes it's easier it just was easier to me to do 2 separate. So that was one of the reasons. And when should you separate? It just really depends on what you would like to do. I have talked to Sonlight families in the booth that come in during conventions, and they have only done one Sonlight level every year, and it has worked well for them to do that. And what they do is they go by their oldest child's age, and they, that's the level they do. So let's say they start with B, then they do B as a family. The younger ones are certainly going to participate, just like we've talked about. Sometimes the interest is going to lead that. C, they keep going. D, E, and then when they get up to G, then maybe they let the younger guys read some of the B books, or they might, read aloud. If this is one important thing, whenever I started in B, I would say, reading that book, that long book that seems so long, whenever I got to G and I was reading aloud at that level, coming back to B, it feels like a breeze to read the book that seemed daunting back at the beginning. So there is a growth that happens there as you're reading aloud, and your, basically, I guess, stamina of reading or whatever, where it just seems like a snap to read a book after you've gone up through the levels and then you come back. It just seems so easy, and it's so refreshing to go back and read these fun stories, as your kids are getting older, just enjoying some of those younger stories again. It was almost it didn't seem like work to me to do that, to go back and enjoy some of those younger books. So that was one thing that this particular family that I talked to, that I'm remembering, they just chose one level every year and they never did more than one level. And I think that was pretty revolutionary for me to think about, because I've heard of a lot of people that combine and do different things. Whatever works best for your family. There's a lot of ways to do Sonlight well. So, let's see, when is it a good idea to take the condensed options that Sonlight offers? So basically, I think this question, she had 2 children, 22 months apart, grades 1 and 3, and she was thinking ahead to like G and H, so way down the road. Would it be too complicated to do this stuff in the combined lessons the first year and then cycle back and do the G and H that was skipped in the condensed year during the second year with my younger daughter? So she's saying, would it be okay to do W 1 year and then come back and do G and H? And I remember thinking I might need to do something like that too. What someone ended up advising me to do, which I did, was I did G and H separately and then dropped whatever, if I needed to drop books. And I ended up doing, actually we did all of G and we went through it very quickly. It was just one of those years that we were just firing on all cylinders. My son was loving reading, and there are years that are more like that, and there are years that you plod through just based on what's going on, sicknesses or any of those kind of things, life events. So basically, I would just say, you know, look ahead and see, you make a plan, and then realize you're probably gonna, you know, like, it'll be altered. But, you know, the reasons that people use condensed options, I know that sometimes people that live in Canada, I think that was mentioned in the original question, the reader was from Canada, and I wanted to show this book because this is one. I just want to mention that we don't always remember the books that are from a region when we get asked, but I just happened to notice this on my shelf today, and this is a book that's from H, that is from Canada. But you're going to have books peppered in that are from, you know, different areas. You know, we're going to, you know, hit different countries. So if you're from Europe, or if, you know, Asia, or, you know, wherever you live currently, if you want to cover some more history, or if you want to do a Canada, or if you want to do a state history, you know, there are things that people like to do like that. Like they may want to do a condensed year of American history and then do, you know, history of your state, or, you know, history of your region or country. So, you know, basically people do condensed levels for different reasons, and maybe trying to fit the scope and sequence in. So you're starting with world history, and then, or world, you know, cultures, you know, overview, then American history, and then we come in, we do 2 years of world history, generally B and C, and then D and E, that's 2 years of American history. Some people condense that into D plus E for 1 year of, you know, American history. And then in order to get to Eastern Hemisphere, or some of those, some people don't do Eastern Hemisphere, which is F. Some people opt not to do J, History of Science. That's a new level. It's a history program, but it covers kind of a lot of the science, the background of science, and the history of that. So, you know, different children, some of my guys were not as interested in the history of science as others. So maybe my biology major, it wasn't available when he was doing that, when he would have been eligible for that. He would have loved that, I think. So it's just, you know, looking at your family and what you need, and then deciding, and then fitting in those condensed years if you would like to. I have never done a condensed year. I did opt to do B and C separately, and G and H separately. One little note, detailed note about condensed years that I think it's important to know is that if you are going to think that you're going to repeat in the future, your instructor's guide, if you get G and H separately, then you want to update later, you can get your repurchase discount, which is 50%. It's significant. If you want to then update, if you see something and you're like, oh, I love the new options, the new books, I like the look of this, I think I want to go this way, then you can use that repurchase discount for G if you've bought G, H if you bought H, and W if you've bought W. But if you buy W for your oldest, then you're not going to have that repurchase discount on G because you've never bought G, you know. So that's just something to consider, just a little practical note that I would like to know as a parent, that if you're making that decision, you might want to think about that. If you want to reuse it and you know, just reuse what you have, you're not going to have access to G if you haven't bought G before. But if you go the route of doing G and H and just do it a little bit faster, and you're able to do that maybe in a year, year and a half, you know, however you, if you, you know, depending on how you go forward and how quickly you want to read, what kind of, you know, how fast you want to go through that. I think it's just good to know the details of that, if you're going to want that repurchase discount of 50% off, then you need to think through which level to buy for that reason too. And then just overall, I see we're totally out of time, but if you, just the details on choosing packages, yeah, I do think that it's a good idea to write down your plans for, you know, if you are, you know, kind of looking ahead. It did help me each year to year, to kind of say, okay, here's where we are, here's what we've covered, here's where we're going. And I, you know, I found that helpful. One other thing I wanted, I'm not sure if I said this or not, Penderwick's, in level C, I believe, is one that, when we got to this book, we opted to read a sequel. So if my guys definitely remembered the Penderwicks, and they remembered everything about it. And so when we got to this, if we've already read it, then we might read a sequel with one of the other kiddos. So that's a good idea to do. Can you buy G and H and then just the condensed IG for the one that is doing condensed, or are there books in W that aren't in G and H? No, if you buy a W, all of the books come from G and H, so it's like the best of G and H. And then just the condensed IG. Yeah, you can buy G and H books with a condensed IG. Yes, you can certainly do that. Then you would have the extra books, but they wouldn't be scheduled. And if you're going to want that schedule, you may want to get the, you know, it just depends on which way you want to do that. Books in W, yeah. Okay, I hope that answered your question. So yeah, if you have any other questions, I'm going to wrap up because that time went very fast. And if you have any other questions, I would love for you to just pop those below in the you know, in the chat in the app. And I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.